I'm Tamara Thomas, editor-in-chief of UrbanHealthToday.com, part of the DocWire family of medical news sites, and I want to thank you for tuning in to Urban Health Weekly. Our goal each week is to keep you informed of the latest in health and medical news right from today's headlines. It's time to empower yourself with open conversations about your medical care with news that matters to you. So are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Urban Health Weekly, and this is Tamara Thomas, and I'm here with my good friend Lou, and we're going to talk, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We're going to be talking about Omicron and everything that's going on in the news with Omicron, what we know so far, and everything in between. And how are you, Mr. Lewis?
I'm fine, but remember, I am the producer. I am not a good friend.
Okay.
I want my official title.
Fine, you're not my good friend. You're
today. I may not be a good friend because I may have to disagree with you on some things. So.
That's fine. You can disagree. So I can't call you my good friend.
No,
seriously.
I'm not sure. We'll have to wait until after the show to see if we're still friends.
I guess with all the Me Too stuff, you never know. How it could be misconstrued. Yeah. Anyway, so let's jump into it. All right, medical news of the week. Is gluten-free bread healthier than regular bread? An estimated 1% of people worldwide who have celiac disease, a serious autoimmune condition triggered by eating gluten and can impair nutrient absorption and lead to symptoms like diarrhea, weight loss, fatigue, anemia, and a blistery, itchy rash. The only effective way to manage celiac disease is strict and lifelong gluten avoidance. For others with milder wheat-related sensitivities, eating the grain doesn't cause the intestinal damage found in celiac disease, but can cause gastrointestinal discomfort and symptoms like fatigue and headache that usually go away when wheat is avoided. It's not clear how many people have this condition, called non-celiac wheat sensitivity, but it may be more common than celiac disease. A third, much less common wheat-related condition is a wheat allergy, which can cause allergic reactions like diarrhea, vomiting, facial swelling, or difficulty breathing within minutes to hours after eating wheat. If you have celiac disease, wheat sensitivity, or wheat allergy, going with a gluten-free bread is clearly the better choice. But in a 2017 survey of 1,000 people in the United States and Canada who purchased gluten-free groceries conducted by the food and beverage ingredient supplier Ingredion, 46% said they bought those products for reasons other than a medical condition. Among their top motivations, wanting to reduce inflammation or consume fewer artificial ingredients, believing that gluten-free products were healthier or more natural, and thinking that such products would help with weight loss. However, none of these beliefs are true, says Ann R. Lee, a registered dietitian and an assistant professor of nutritional medicine at the Celiac Disease Center at Columbia University Medical Center. You know, they're right. Gluten-free bread is not necessarily healthier than gluten bread. It's just not as foreign to the body because the wheat of today's genetically modified food supply is not the wheat that you or I grew up with, or even the wheat of the 1950s. So my take on this is only eat bread if you're absolutely jonesing for some, but make sure it's organic or homemade if you can help it. If you can swing it, if it's homemade, don't buy like regular flour, buy organic all-purpose flour to make your bread. Even better is just no bread at all. So Lou, I know you have strong opinions about bread and gluten and all that. So I'm going to give you the floor.
Well, I have a confession to make. So let me first start out with confessing. I've had a lifelong love affair, and that love affair has been with bread. I first discovered how important bread was to me, both bread and pizza and stuff like that was to me.
Yes, you are addicted to anything that's carbohydrates.
Yeah. But let's stick with bread right now because everybody always thinks about gluten-free and bread. It started out when I was much, much younger. I was trying to make weight for some athletic competition, and I went on Atkins or no-carb diet or whatever you want to call it. And, of course, I could not eat bread for a month. And after 2 weeks, I found myself going to bread stores and being like a little kid. And putting my nose against it and breathing it in and all of that. So I'm going to say I will give you a lot of kudos here. My love affair with bread is for the stuff that the bakers make, the old-fashioned, loaves and done at a bakery where
the artisanal, more healthy.
Right. It doesn't have the 8 million preservatives so that the loaf lasts a month or two. This kind of bread goes bad after a day or two.
Yes.
It's to be eaten fresh, or the bread that's made and all of that. And my mouth is watering as I talk. So if I start slurring words, it's because now, I shouldn't even talk about this. I also say that, if you are diagnosed with celiac disease or any condition, bread is absolutely off the table. So I am talking about that person that's in between, that person that maybe...
I don't even know what that means, in between. Like, what does that mean, in between?
Some people have very mild
people
allergies.
Who don't have it. Are you talking about people who don't have any allergies necessarily, but just avoid bread because...
avoid bread, or it might cause some inflammation or other things, but it doesn't really... We're not talking about celiac disease or they have a full-blown allergy to it, but wheat is not kind to their bodies or metabolism or whatever.
Right.
Or whatever.
Okay.
So
Well, give me your spectrum. What's your spectrum? So that's your criteria for an in-between.
An in-between should really eat it very sparingly and should avoid...
No, that's not what I'm asking. Yeah. What I'm asking is, okay, so you have a spectrum. So on the extreme end of avoidance is celiac. Right. Then you have what you call your middle of the road.
Middle of the road. And I think most people are in the middle of the road where, it's not exactly the best thing for you, but at the end of the day...
So who is bread good for then? Who is on the other opposite end of the scale from the celiac people?
I have no idea. I grew up in the 60s and, I saw those commercials where Wonder Bread helps you grow in 8 different ways. And you see this kid eats a slice and it was almost like Popeye. You had instant height.
Shrunk to the spinach.
Yeah, all of a sudden
spinach.
You go from a little scrawny kid to an NFL quarterback, just eating the Wonder Bread. But I would stay. I'm with you. I would stay away from, but not avoid 100%, but stay away from the breads that you buy in a bag at the supermarket, regardless.
But that's where most people buy their bread.
But, if you do eat at a high-end restaurant that make their own bread daily, or if you go to the baker and get a nice roll or bagel or something, to me, that's doable. It's doable in moderation. I wouldn't make it a staple of your diet. Now, me, so to say people, I'm not going to do it, I think that puts you under a lot of pressure. Because all of a sudden, then you start reading menus, and all of a sudden, I can't go here, I can't go there, I can't have this, and I can't have that. I think under moderation, most people, unless they have a serious condition and a serious reaction, can stand some gluten. And I'm going to be honest with you, gluten-free bread, while it's edible, it's barely edible to me on the scale of edible.
Yes, I know of your strong displeasure with and distaste for gluten-free
You've
products.
Actually seen me taste it. And
I've seen you taste it. I've seen you turn up your nose at it. So I'm very familiar with
it tastes like cardboard as far as I'm concerned. Is a main ingredient.
I don't know if I agree with that, but go ahead.
But it's not the king's way of eating and all that. So my saying is that moderation, yes. Moderation is avoided. And more I'm avoiding.
Wait a minute. You can't say moderation is avoided. Either you're being moderate or you're avoiding.
Moderate means that, given a choice for something else, you go something else if it's a good choice. But if, you're in a, middle to high end restaurant and they have a club sandwich and they do their own bread there and all that, hey, go for it.
Here's the thing, Mr. Moneybags. Not everybody has the opportunity or the means to go to a high-end restaurant and experience artisanal, freshly baked, locally sourced ingredients that are organic. I'm just saying the reality is most people go and they get their bread at the King Cullen, what's that one? The Publix. What's that other one? That's where people go and get their bread. They get their bread from a manufacturer that bags it up, that uses genetically modified ingredients to keep the food on the shelf longer so that even mold won't dare eat it. And that should be your clue right there. Like, if mold won't even eat it, should you be eating it, right? But
okay.
Well, I mean, just
okay, I go for that,
but I'm saying that most people don't have that luxury. The other problem is there are a lot of people who have low level inflammation that they are not aware of, that is caused by a lot of these foods, such as bread. So this really goes deeper than gluten. This really goes to the amount of, because look, carbohydrates become sugar in the body.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about like sweets and treats and stuff like that, your cookies and cakes and stuff. Bread is in that category as well. I mean, it may not taste sweet to your mouth when you eat it, but your body recognizes it as sugar. And the high amount of carbohydrates in the human diet is a reason why so many of us are overweight or obese, have, blood sugar issues and low level inflammation that eventually leads to conditions like diseases like diabetes, and arthritis and all these, and cancer eventually, if it continues on too long. So the idea that eating gluten-free is somehow going to change that is absolutely incorrect. Gluten-free bread does not absolve you from the carbohydrate problem. It may stave off some of the worst effects of having the wheat, but the overall net effect is still the same on your body. And so my take on it is, like I said, if you're absolutely jonesing, you have to have a sandwich, then okay, have some, but try to make it high quality. Get a bread maker, invest in some good flour, make it at home if you can. It's much cheaper to make the bread at home and much healthier because you're not going to be dealing with like all of the products. And some people may say, look, I don't have time for all of that. I'm just going to pick up my bread. My bread is, I don't know, 2 for $3 or whatever the price is. I'm sorry that I'm ignorant to the prices of bread. I don't eat bread.
I think they're like $4.99 now.
Oh, is it $4.99?
Yeah, it's like $5.
$5.
$5, so that's like run of the mill. Like nothing.
Well, what kind of bread is $5?
What?
Really?
Yeah.
Holy hell! I am so sorry that I'm so out of touch, people. I just I'm embarrassed.
There is a woman who has her food delivered. But anyway, here's my 2 cents. Yeah.
But the point that I'm making is, if you can avoid buying bread in the store, that includes gluten-free bread too. Now, if you have little ones that have issues dealing with gluten, that's a different thing. With kids, you kind of have to play it a little, closer to the vest.
Right.
But for adults, you don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need that sandwich, and if you really feel strongly that you do need it, then make it at home. Buy it locally if you can from your local baker. So instead of buying that loaf every week, maybe save some money and go to the bakery, find out what kind of flour they use. A lot of times they are using, unfortunately, the all-purpose GMO flour, but maybe they're not. I don't know.
And when you did say Mr. Moneybags, and I agree, there's a little bit of that in there. But a little bit of
with your artisanal
or wannabe Mr. Moneybags.
Oh, unfortunately, I'm suffering from the same thing. I didn't know how much a loaf of bread was.
But
I'm ashamed to admit that.
Here's the thing. You can go to your local baker and just get the one-day portion when you're jonesing for something to make yourself a
But we're talking about people who have families. I'm a single mom. I've got 4 kids. I've got to feed them. I don't have time, or I work. Yeah. I don't have the time or the money to go to the bakery and buy 1 loaf. It's not enough to feed all my kids.
Well, my also suggestion would be, it's not only the bread, it's the stuff you put on it. And
well, what's wrong with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
That's fine, but if you start putting in cold cuts with nitrates and
oh Lord, now we getting into a whole other thing.
Exactly.
That's true. That's why I think staying away from, because to me, staying away from bread, that's the top of the triangle for changing the way you eat.
Right.
Having fresher fruits and vegetables in place of the bread, and, moving away from that sandwich driven type diet will be so much the better for everyone in your household. Go ahead.
Okay. And yeah, I was just going to say, and of course, we'll get bleeped out. So I'll just say the expression: don't make yourself an S sandwich, because you start out with the processed bread. And next thing you know is you put in some cold cuts because you're in a hurry and blah, blah, blah. And what you wind up doing is putting all sorts of chemicals in your body. So I agree with there are healthier alternatives, but I think the healthier alternatives can also be found in the bread. I think that, to me, gluten-free is only for people that have that disease. That's my opinion. But other people,
Yeah, I just don't think you should replace one kind of bread with the other kind of bread. I think all of it should just be like the smallest sliver of your diet as possible.
I've moved towards wraps. I in some instances, breakfast wraps, which I haven't done lately. Believe it or not.
But you always turn your nose up at the wraps. You're always like regretting that I've eaten out with you. You do the wrap and then you're like, I'll never do this
the wraps. I've turned my nose up.
But like when you get like
outdoor dining,
when you get like a big juicy like sandwich with like thick sliced bread, you're like,
oh yeah, oh yeah. But the wraps. The problem I have with wraps, especially with outdoor dining, is that the food gets cold really quickly. The bread serves as an insulator, so when I'm having a breakfast wrap, you got to gobble that down fast.
Yeah, that's
because by the back end of the wrap,
I'm not a gobbler. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm a slow eater.
Yeah. All right.
Well, so speaking of, I mentioned peanut butter and jelly, which you didn't really give your opinion one way or the other. Well, so interestingly enough, speaking of peanut butter and jelly, there are 4 food allergy immunotherapy companies actually making immunotherapy, an oral immunotherapy for peanut butter, of all things. Mm-hmm. So in practice, oral immunotherapy had historically been an off-label practice in which allergists would give patients small but increasing amounts of an allergen that in large quantities would otherwise trigger an allergic reaction. The food in question here, as I said, peanut butter. My question is, why are we going so hard to introduce foods to people that their bodies clearly don't want? Why are we doing this?
Oh, a couple of things.
Is it really that important? Is peanut that nutritious?
On first glance, I was there with you, where I said, "Is that peanut butter and jelly sandwich that important and that necessary?"
No, it's not.
That I need to go through all of that. However, there is the accidental. I got exposed to peanut, or there was sesame sauce.
Well, that's different. Yes,
it was in some food
that will help children. Yes,
that would salad or something.
That would definitely help. A lot of these schools now, they have this nut-free policy,
right?
Which, if you any parent knows, a lot of children are very persnickety, and sometimes the only thing they'll eat is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Well, that was the old standard when I went to school. Right. And remember, I'll say it again. I went back in the 60s and 70s. You had your hot lunch, and you had and the old standby, your choice 3 was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I remember that in public school too.
And they used to do that. Today, if you did
whole wheat bread and peanut butter and jelly.
That school they'd shoot the principal after class, because now that there's been a realization that it does harm people. Not a lot, but it does harm people.
And so what they've done is they just eradicated there's just no nuts. So you can't even give your child who's not allergic, because if God forbid they speak into the face of or kiss or touch a child who has an anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, and they have an anaphylactic shock or seizure, then that's a huge problem. So just no nuts. In fact, when I send my little one to school, if she has a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the morning, on gluten-free bread, by the way, I'll let the school know, by the way, she had peanut butter and jelly, so that if there's a kid in the class, they can make sure to wipe her down or avoid the kid or whatever, just, as a precaution. But that's where we are now. Anyway, you go ahead. You know how I feel about this.
I guess, if you do have that type of allergy, you can inadvertently eat peanuts. I mean, it's in a lot of salads and stuff like that. A lot of places, especially if you're eating out, not everybody tells you all their ingredients. You may be having Thai food and something has peanut sauce, even mild peanut sauce, or the spoon wasn't cleaned right, or God knows what.
Yeah.
So better safe than sorry. If you have that, I think it's an alternative. And rather than thinking every single meal is a death sentence and having that EpiPen or whatever available.
And EpiPens are so expensive now. Thanks, Big Pharma.
Yeah, so you're welcome. Oh,
please, you don't work for Big Pharma. Go ahead.
Anyway, I think it is look, it's something in the toolkit. And if the person wants to avail
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point.
It's good, but it's something that if I was a doctor and I had a patient that had that, I would talk to the patient and counsel and say, look, there are alternatives. But I don't see this as, I want to do this so I can eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
But there are people who will literally do this because they want to have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I'm just questioning, do you really need to do that?
No.
I remember seeing a report years ago, and it made my jaw hit the floor. It was this old man, and by old, he was probably in his 70s. Mm-hmm. And he missed being able to eat a roast beef sandwich because it created gastric upset. He actually underwent a surgery that could have killed him just so that he would be able to resume eating his roast beef sandwiches. Now you tell me, why punish your body this way? Why not just say, look, can't do it anymore? Why not respect the body's wisdom? I know I'm on my high horse, but I think, a lot of times people don't respect their body's wisdom. Like when your body's telling you something, and when your body says, look, we don't like this, you've got to just leave it alone. Mm-hmm. It's not about what your mouth wants sometimes. It's about what your body's telling you is working for you and what's not working for you. Mm-hmm. So I just heard this and I was just like, really? Really? That's what we're doing now? But okay, I guess people are entitled to do what they want. And, you raise a good point about the food allergies and anaphylactic kids. It would make a huge difference in their lives. So there. Well, should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a short break.
Yeah, let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
From the Lower 9 to Uptown, Mid-City to the West Bank, we've got you covered, New Orleans. WHIV 102.3 FM.
And we're back. And this is an interesting story here. A study discovers a key gender difference in how people react to stress and alcohol. This is from inverse.com. Booze ads tend to show glam drinkers having a good time, but alcohol can also be a tempting solve during the least glamorous, most stressful times. You have a hard day at work, so you crack open a beer. Who doesn't have that friend who insists they will have one drink to calm the nerves, and then suddenly it's 11 p.m., they're 5 drinks deep, and they want tequila shots? This kind of binge drinking can lead some down a path towards alcohol use disorder, a condition characterized by uncontrolled drinking and preoccupation with alcohol. But who ends up with the condition is down to a complex mix of factors, including genetics, environmental factors, and occupational stress. Inverse talked to Julie Patak-Peckham, an assistant research professor in the Department of Psychology at Arizona State University who studies alcohol use disorders. The lack of gender diversity means there is a lack of good data on what tips people to problem drinking, but she and her team are trying to change that. Recently, her team published a study in the Journal of Psychology of Addicted Behavior, specifically looking at how men and women use alcohol when they are under stress. Her findings suggest the key difference in how men and women consume alcohol, at least under certain conditions. We study impaired control over drinking, which is intending to limit to 1 or 2 alcoholic beverages per social event. But some individuals can stop after 1 or 2 drinks, and some cannot, Patak-Peckham says. Some individuals just keep drinking once they have some alcohol in their system. To me, impaired control over drinking is at the crux of addiction. Her study found that women tended to drink more when under stress than men did. Men whose first drink contained alcohol and who then experienced stress drank more than men who received the alcohol-free drink. Women who experienced stress drank heavily regardless of if their first drink contained alcohol or not. This is interesting, because Malcolm Gladwell talked about social drinking in his book, Talking to Strangers, and its connection to the rise in sexual assault. I know that was kind of like left fieldish, but it is kind of related. This reminds me of what happened to me when I was young, but this wasn't like a stress-related situation. I think it was more like an anxiety-related situation. So my husband at the time, husband number one, he was bartending at an event, and I was sitting at the bar keeping him company, and he just he gave me champagne, and I had it with cherries, and it was all very delicious. And then I just realized halfway through the second one that, wait a minute, I haven't eaten. So this might go left really quickly. Now, thank goodness this was like a house party situation. It wasn't like I was at a club or something. So I passed out and someone got him immediately. And I vividly remember him literally slinging me over his shoulder and putting me in the car and taking me home and putting me in the bed. And that was, I blacked out. And those were the only things I remember after that. But it was really embarrassing. And I never did anything like that again. I mean, thank goodness it was a situation where I was in a safe environment. I was among friends. Just imagine if this was like at some bar or some social event that no one knew me, no one knew him, and I was there by myself. You understand? That's how things could go bad. Some skeezy guy or some other drunk guy could have come and done the same thing, and I wouldn't have known, and I could have been assaulted. I mean, and this was when I was legal drinking age, but I was young at the time. So I see the wisdom in this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's like what causes people to drink. Like, me, I'll confess, I'm a social drinker. So if people are around me, I'll drink. If I'm home by myself, the urge to drink, I rarely, almost never have. Only time I might have an urge to drink is if I'm celebrating something, even if it's by myself, or if I've had a really long, not dreadful day, but just a long, tiring.
So you do use alcohol to de-stress?
I'm not going to call it de-stress. Like if I've had a stressful, bad day where, I got business problems or something's going on, I'm not going to even think about alcohol. It's the furthest thing from my mind. But if I'm just tired from like a lot of work or just, maybe mowing the lawn or something, not that I ever mow the lawn, but I'm just using that as an analogy, some physical labor or something. Just sitting down and having a de-stress drink works. But I don't have the urge to go to number 2 or number 3. When it's social, sometimes I'll go to number 2 just because the people around me are having it, and sure, I'll have another. But it's not an urge for me. It's sort of like, okay, I'll go along and have a second one.
Okay, so you do it to be social.
Yeah, but I don't feel that urge to go number 3. I don't get that binge, even though I see it in people where they go with the binge and then they go with the shots and all that. I politely might take a shot and then just put it down somewhere and just spill it in a plant or somewhere.
Well, how dare you do that to an innocent plant? But yeah, a lot of people do that. Yeah. Well, I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink, but it's not because I just don't like the taste of it. And you can make it as sweet and delicious as you want. I just don't like the taste of alcohol. It's just not an appealing taste to me, and I just won't drink it. But you know what the booze industry has done is they have gone out of their way to make, and for a long time, there were a lot of women like me who were like, this tastes disgusting, I just won't drink it. Right. And the alcohol industry has gone out of its way to make drinks sweet and tasty because women tend to respond to like a sweeter liqueur kind of, to make drinks more palatable to women. Right. It's kind of like what the tobacco industry did, where they added menthol to cigarettes to make them, more palatable. They've gone out of their way to make drinks for women so that women will drink more. Right. And, increase their market cap or what have you. And I think it's absolutely despicable. And I think that's why
the hard lemonade, all that stuff.
Yes. To widen the audience of who will, drink their drinks. If it is sweet, people will tend to overlook the bite of the alcohol. Me, I cannot. I just find alcohol disgusting, period. I mean, an occasional rum in my like I'll make a rum cake or something like that, but that's cooking. That's not like, oh, I'm gonna have a tasty rum,
Yeah.
And I think it's despicable, but here we are. Now we have proof positive that alcohol just is not really meant for women. And we've kind of overridden our defense mechanism, which is our sense of taste, and created a generation. And you see it on TV all the time too, right? Like every time you see people pounding down, I need a drink, and pounding down alcohol. I don't see anyone drinking water. I don't see anyone having like an iced tea or something like that, an iced tea. They're having like liquor every time. Girl, I need a drink. Oh, I don't know about you, but I'm going to have a drink. Will you have a drink with me? And it's just become such a cultural thing that there's just really no escaping it.
Well, I was never aware of this disparity until this article. And this article, there's a lot to unpack in this article.
Yeah.
But first of all, there is a bit of a disparity in this article in terms of.
But studies have always shown that women metabolize liquor different than men.
Right.
Women are not able. They think they can drink a man under the table, and that's just not true because we're not biologically made to do that.
No, because the drinks, when a bartender gives you a drink, usually there's not a he and a she size.
Yeah.
Like clothing.
It's one size. Yeah.
It's one size. Now I'm twice the size of most women. So my body weight is 2 times that. And if you look at that, that means that the same drink is going to have a different reaction.
But also you metabolize it differently.
Well, what this study shows, it didn't get into the metabolizing as much as whatever the inherent issues of stopping.
Yeah.
Where for whatever reason, they didn't get into what the reason is, but for whatever reason, the study showed that men were more likely to stop sooner than women after 1 or 2 or whatever their number was. They tended to drop off. The second thing, if you read deep into the article, the second thing that I found is that the people of the study also started having the people do math problems and put the people under stress. And the group that was under stress tended to drink a lot more. So we're finding correlations between stress inducements and the fact that people just don't stop drinking. So some of that is a little discerning.
But particularly women, because even among the heavier drinkers, women still overrode that urge and continued drinking. Right.
So the effect is twofold. The effects of 2 drinks to a woman half my size is almost twice what it is to me. Number 2, if they go for number 3, they've now had the equivalent of me having 6 drinks. So maybe it's not so good. And I think it's maybe there should be limits or something put in bars. I know that.
Yeah, but then you do that and women are going to say, well, you're sexist and you're discriminating against me. And I should be able to drink just as much as a man should. So, well, look, I'm very, very against taking away a woman's agency. I think if a woman wants to drink herself silly, she should drink herself silly. I don't advise it. I think it's a horrible idea, but I think if a woman wants to do that legally, she should be able to do it. I think what we're looking at here is why are women drinking so much? Not why are women drinking, but why are women drinking so much? I don't know. I'm not really qualified to talk about that. I mean, I could talk about maybe a slightly related, but my addiction to sugar. Like I like chocolate and, well, not as much as before, but I can relate in those terms of like I would eat an entire box of chocolate and I would just look around and be like, oh my God.
So if nobody's looking, you would eat the entire box?
I used to be one of those people that would eat I just down the entire, and then what I would, and then I would just be like, oh my God, what have I done? And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I would just keep eating and eating and eating. And then the whole box would be gone. And then I would just be like afterward, I would come back to myself, like, what the hell did I really just eat? Like 36 chocolates back to back. But that's not an inebriation. It's not, but it can be applied the same way, right? Like,
it's like an Oreo cookie. Some people start with one Oreo, and next thing you know,
and then next thing you hold the whole bag is gone. Right. So I can relate in that sense.
I've been there and done that with potato chips and other things.
Right, exactly. Well, so like for me, addiction is addiction. Like I don't think one addiction is morally better than another addiction, stuff like that. But some addictions are more, I would say, destructive than others. And I'm not saying that having a sugar addiction is terribly destructive to your body and to your beauty and to your overall health. It's obviously it's not the same effect. It's not the same immediate effect as alcohol, where you're not incapacitated. So I don't know. It's really hard for me to judge, but I just thought it was interesting that here is yet another reason why women should really pay attention to their alcohol intake. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's pretty much all I can say about that.
All right, so why don't we take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Frenchman to Oak Street, Tremaine, Gentilly, and the CBD. V102.3, WHIV-FM, the vibe of the city for human rights and social justice. WHIV, 102.3 FM.
And we're back. And we've got a lot to unpack here about Omicron. And so first, let's show of hands. Who has been impacted by, we can't do show of hands, let's say I. Who has been impacted so far by Omicron?
Okay, I'll raise both hands and 2 feet. So if you can imagine, I've got four up there. But yes, I was looking forward to having a normal holiday season after 2 years.
Nobody I know is having a normal holiday season.
Oh, no, it's done, but I was so looking forward to having a normal holiday season. Holiday season, 2020 holiday season was, and I felt safe because, that was the season of misinformation because, basically, as long as you didn't eat a bat, you were safe and all this nonsense that was coming out at that time. Then last year, the vaccine wasn't here yet, hunkered down. Within a month, we'll all be safe. Then we started learning about breakthrough infections and blah, blah, blah. And then finally, we thought things were under control. Had my booster. I know. And I'm going to go out and go to a restaurant now. And then Omicron. It was
For me, it's a similar trajectory. It's like I finally, was able to resume some activities after I got vaccinated. And then the concern was, well, wait a minute, my little one's not vaccinated. I don't want to give her the Delta. So I've got to lay low. So some things I can do and other things I can't do. And then finally she got vaccinated and I was like, oh man, finally I can get back to life, and then I get my booster and I'm thinking, man, I can finally get back to like massages and all this other great stuff. And now I can't because Omicron has, her babysitter contacted me and was like, so sorry to tell you, I just tested positive for COVID. And I'm like, oh no. So now we're quarantining. So there's that. So now I've got to get her tested. For me, I'm not terribly worried. I'm going to test. I got some at-home tests, but I'm not terribly worried because I wasn't around her very long. I mean, she was in the house, but I'm more worried about my little one because she was around her for several hours, not wearing a mask. So she's been fine. It's been in several days, and she hasn't had any symptoms. I don't have any symptoms either. But I'm going to take her to her pediatrician and get her tested, because trying to test her at home has just been a complete show. And that. So that's where, so we had to cancel plans to go see the grandparents. And that's that,
Well, I think I can describe this as two ways. Number one, in a more rational thought, I feel like I'm surrounded by Omicron, not somebody who's been like right next to me, but somebody who's been next to somebody who's right next to me has had some contact with somebody who's infected.
I'm telling you.
Just about everybody's hunkering down and all that. I haven't had somebody sneeze on me yet. But what this brings to mind is like that scene out of that movie Alien, where everybody's eating and all of a sudden a monster pops out of you. And yeah, it is kind of, but that's kind of how Omicron feels. Like you're all there with a group of people and, they're your friends. And then all of a sudden one of them has it. And then the monster's in the room, the monster's on the table. What do you do?
Well, you know what this makes me feel like? Do you remember that Dustin Hoffman movie with Rene Russo, Contagion?
Oh, yeah. That's theater, yeah.
Oh, my God. Where someone sneezed in a movie theater and everyone was laughing and you could see the droplets just getting into everyone's mouth.
And I saw it on the big screen and these droplets were watermelon size.
Oh, my God. That's exactly how I feel anytime I go someplace where someone is like not wearing a mask. I'll just like walk out immediately because I'm like, oh my God, I don't want their droplets getting into my eyes or something.
Tons of movies,
But the first question that we got to tackle is, how long does Omicron take to make you sick? You and I had a disagreement about this recently. I felt that it was very quick and you felt it was like 5 days. And it turns out that I was right. So
well, I don't know. Let her be right, and then I'll make.
No, I don't. It's not that I want to be right. I'm just giving you what I observed. All right. The original form of SARS-CoV-2 was a bit of a slowpoke. After infiltrating our bodies, the virus would typically take about 5 or 6 days before symptoms kicked in. In the many months since that now defunct version of the virus emerged, new variants have arrived to speed up the timeline. Estimates for this exposure to symptom gap, called the incubation period, clocked in at about 5 days for Alpha, 4 days for Delta. Now word has it that Omicron may have brought it down to as little as 3 days. If that number holds, it's probably bad news. These trimmed down cook times are thought to play a major part in helping coronavirus variants spread. In all likelihood, the shorter the incubation period, the faster someone becomes contagious, and the quicker an outbreak spreads. A short incubation makes the virus much harder to control, according to epidemiologist Jennifer Nutzel at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. This unfortunately leaves very little time to detect the virus, treat with antivirals, and curtail the spread. I mean, as you know, here in the Northeast, we're facing a wildfire spread of COVID cases. It seems like everyone is quarantining. And, urgent care centers have lines around the block and stores are constantly out of at-home tests. I mean, I was lucky that I was able to get some online, but it's just been bananas here. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the country.
Well, I found 2 yesterday, kind of under the counter, blink with the pharmacist type thing. Out, I had to drive out to the end of Long Island to the boondocks.
You had to drive to the wealthy neighborhoods.
All right, wealth shaming. I mean, if they got money, they're gonna have a deal.
I'm not wealth shaming you. Yeah. I'm just,
So that's what I did. I went out to Long Island. I think if I keep driving, it's gonna get wealthier and wealthier out here, and I'll just keep trying until I find somebody who's willing to sell me one. And that's
because there's just none here in Brooklyn. It's
but the shorter incubation time, that's kind of scary because all of a sudden, you have it and you don't realize it, and just the speed in which it travels is a little daunting.
Yeah.
Hopefully that means it'll burn out a lot quicker. But also let's look at some of the other data that's coming on with.
Well,
Omicron.
data from the UK already is suggesting that Omicron is less likely than Delta to send people to the hospital. So researchers looking at real-world coronavirus cases in Britain reported recently that the Omicron variant of the coronavirus appears to be less severe than the once dominant Delta strain. Early evidence from Scotland and England suggests that Omicron is sending fewer people to the hospital. That surveillance tracks well with the latest observation from South Africa, where public health officials have reported that the Omicron variant is tending to result in milder illness. Scientists have not been sure whether that finding, however, would hold elsewhere. Experts remain worried that a sudden massive surge of a highly infectious but less virulent Omicron variant could still flood hospitals with very sick patients. New daily coronavirus cases reported in Britain exceeded 100,000 for the first time in the pandemic. But the United Kingdom is also furiously giving people their third or booster jab, administering almost 1 million shots daily. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said his government is watching the data, but would not call for stricter measures to fight the spread until after Christmas at the earliest. This is kind of in line, like I said, with what I've observed. I had a wicked sore throat recently, and it was the day after I was exposed to an unvaccinated handyman. I also noticed that my little one reported having a sore throat. That's like one of the main symptoms of this new. And you know me, I'm like hypochondriac.
Everything is Omicron. Yeah,
everything is Delta or Omicron.
Yeah, as a disclaimer, she's had COVID at least 17 times.
Yeah.
After every show, we have COVID. Yeah.
Anyway, I did notice that she reported having a sore throat after like 2 short weeks of school. So like the Thanksgiving break, where she was only in school for like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And then I forget what the other one was. But, you know, it was another short week. I think it was Veterans Day or something like that. And she was like, I have a sore throat. And I was like, again, already? It was such a short week. So that's where my observation came from, that this is a very short thing. I don't think this is the same 5. And you're like, oh, no, it's 5, at least 7 days. But I'm glad, you know.
It's about 3. I stand corrected on that. The data shows that. But the data also...
Let the record show that he stands corrected, that he actually admitted that I was right about something. Okay, I just wanted to. All right.
The data. Let me get into the data a little bit here more. Talk about this.
The data vindicates me, but go ahead.
It does vindicate you in that sense, but also where it's a little. I don't know if I'm going to use this as troubling, but the earlier versions of COVID don't make you necessarily. The immunity doesn't transfer from regular COVID to Delta to.
Well, why would it?
Well,
that's like getting one flu shot and saying that that's going to last.
Right, like I got the Hong Kong flu, so now I'm immune to the avian flu.
It just doesn't work.
That's what's happening here with COVID. As COVID changes, each flavor of COVID seems to be a little different.
And right now, only 1 in 7 people are vaccinated with the booster.
Here in the U.S., yes. Yeah, here in the U.S., where
which is severely...
Israel's going to number 4s. Mm-hmm. So, you know, as we get into the politics part of all of this, you know, it is difficult because a lot of people don't have that third booster. We're now learning that the immunity from the vaccinations dwindles over time. Mm-hmm. And we're also learning that, you know, immunity from one strain doesn't carry over to all the strains. So you could have COVID 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
So your carriers of this disease, the number of carriers of this disease is pretty big. Also, you can have breakthrough COVID.
Yes, which is what happened with the babysitter.
Right. And all of a sudden, that, while not as severe, it's still not a good thing. So there's a lot of ways in which we can get this Omicron.
Well, another good news, I guess, piece of good news is the FDA clears Pfizer's COVID pills for high-risk patients 12 and over. Now, they authorized the first pill for COVID-19, offering a highly effective defense against severe illness that will arrive as the country endures another surge of the pandemic. The drug developed by Pfizer called Paxlovid is authorized for COVID patients age 12 and over who are vulnerable to becoming severely ill because they are older or have medical conditions such as obesity or diabetes. Tens of millions of Americans, including both vaccinated and unvaccinated people, will be eligible if they get infected with the virus. But this sounds to me like if you're under 50, let's say normal weight with no comorbidities, and you get hospitalized for COVID, it's not approved for use on you? Am I misunderstanding that?
No, it's not recommended.
I mean, I don't see why anyone who needs to be hospitalized for COVID can't qualify. Why?
First of all, the pill is not cheap.
Okay.
Each dose, I believe, is $700-800. But let's forget about the price of it. It's to be used early on.
Okay.
So it's to be used within the first few days of COVID, that you have COVID. Now, in some instances, during those early days, you don't know that this thing is going to be long COVID or it's going to be life-threatening at the end or whatever. So it stops being useful towards the middle or the end of the disease. It's not as useful. Secondly, it's more recommended for people who feel that they're going to have a severe impact here. So it's for the elderly, the immunosuppressed. You've got other issues going on.
Right, I understand that, but my question is why? If anybody gets, if anyone requires hospitalization for COVID, why can't they get it? Why do they have to meet certain criteria?
Because it might be.
If you end up in the hospital, you end up in the hospital. It's not like.
It's like telling you to wear a seatbelt after the crash. After X amount of days.
That's not really the same thing.
After X amount of days, the pill doesn't really work that well.
But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about all things being equal. You find out very early. You end up, you go into respiratory distress or whatever. Mm-hmm. You end up that you have to call the ambulance. But you don't meet those criteria. Say you're 40 years old instead of 60 years old. Say you're 130 pounds instead of 230 pounds. Say you don't have any comorbidities like diabetes or asthma or cancer or HIV or whatever. You mean to tell me that these people are being left out and can't get the Paxlovid?
Well, it's not that. It's that there's other things that are more...
and by the way, the treatment is meant to be taken as 30 pills over 5 days. Patients take three pills at a time, 2 of Pfizer's pills and 1 of a low-dose HIV drug known as ritonavir, which helps Pfizer's drug remain active in the body longer. Okay. So, on to speaking of things that just don't make any sense. Dr. Eric Topol, had a recent post on his Substack blog, Ground Truths, and it talked about what a president could have done to counter the pandemic. And it was a really very comprehensive piece where he outlined basically where this stemmed from is Biden recently announced that his administration was going to see to it that COVID tests become available to all Americans starting in January, which is great, but that means you have to wait till after the holidays and people are getting sick now.
Wow.
So,
that leads to, I'll just interject quickly because I don't think we're going to have time to cover it fully. But there's been this whole whose president was better. Oh, Trump was better at handling it. Biden was better at handling it. I think they both did admirable things. They both did a lot of things that kind of say,
Yeah, like his first official act was like when South Africa said, "Hey, we've got this new variant here." His first official act was like to ban South Africans from traveling to the United States.
Yeah, that's going to be lifted today, by the way.
How about mobilizing the United States to like get ready so that when it comes here, we're ready for it, right?
Well, and again, we tried that before. It didn't work. We banned the
it doesn't work because people travel. Because what are you going to do? Stop someone? What about somebody who left South Africa and returns to their country in Europe and has it and wants to come to this country? Are you stopping those people? Are you back tracing where they've been?
Forget it.
This stuff doesn't work.
It doesn't.
And all it does is it leaves egg on your face and it makes you look like you are excluding only certain people. So this is what Dr. Topol says. He says, admittedly, there are many things the White House and President Biden cannot control, like the opposition to vaccines, masks, science, and our main defense tactics to counter the pandemic, like facing very challenging versions of the virus that are hyper contagious and evade our immune system. Yet there are certainly several strategic points that could have been enacted, such as 1, booster shots at 4 months after the second dose, not 6 months. Redefine fully vaccinated as 3 shots. No airplane passengers who are not fully vaccinated or having medical documentation for why it is not the case, such as the policy in Canada and many other countries.
And let me interject here, folks. In the United States, as of right now, only 1 in 7 people are fully vaccinated.
Right. Only 1 in 7 people have received the booster.
And that should be the new definition for fully vaccinated.
Yeah. Right now, the definition of vaccination is if you've had 2 shots or one if it was J&J.
Yeah, and I, as a New Yorker, I'm still trying to get my 3rd shot put into my my app.
Because, don't get me started on that. That I carry the card and I show the app. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Let's move on.
Okay, so the next thing he suggests is distribute KN95 masks to all households. Rapidly scale the production of the anti-COVID pill Paxlovid and fix the data mess. That's a whole... So basically says the CDC is apparently unable to track hospitalizations and deaths by vaccine status, timing, age of the patient, and their relevant coexisting medical conditions. Secretary Javier Becerra of HSS hasn't shown up for the pandemic, but has authority to mandate such data collection across the country. We are trying to determine the clinical severity of Omicron, but have no ability to track the data here. The inability for CDC to see what was happening during the Delta wave and their over 2-month delay in recommending boosters for all adults resulted in a large number of unnecessary cases, as shown on the CDC website just published over the weekend, with only 1 of 3 snapshots since May, already a month old, with only a bit of data tracking cases and deaths, but not hospitalizations, in a limited number of regions of the country. All of these are eminently doable, but our administration continues to take a reactive stance, seemingly incapable of aggressive, bold initiatives that are under their control. Our house of COVID is not in order. We are contributing more COVID than any country to the rest of the world, and have been for months. We can indeed turn this around and show leadership, show the world how to prevail over this pandemic. It's never too late. Thoughts? What do you think?
Well, my thought is, I'll be here a promoter. All of you, anybody out that's interested, Dr. Topol's blog is...
it's called Ground. It's on Substack, and it's called Ground Truths.
Right. Is freely accessible. And Dr. Topol is a true thought leader when it comes to medicine and a lot of things. So he's been, being on the cutting edge for about 2 or 3 decades is amazing, but Dr. Topol has managed to stay that way. So hats off to him, and hats off to making this fully accessible to anybody who wants to find it. I fully agree with this. This is not a one-trick pony. This is not, if we had more testing kits, if we had more of this, if we had more of that. All of these therapies and all of this prevention relies on this, but also I think we have to start getting to the mindset that we're here for the long run. This is not over, and we have to turn this from a pandemic to managed like the flu. And I think
this is approaching endemic, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to start thinking about it that way. You know what? The flu does kill people.
Yes, it does.
And
no question about that.
And we all take flu shots. We all take precautions, and that's.
But experts are starting to say that they think that what's going to happen with the COVID-19 is that it's going to start. They're saying that it can't make stronger, more virulent strains of itself, variants, and it's going to become the next flu in terms of, hope. I mean, yes, fingers crossed.
Right. And the flu has, milder versions and stronger versions every year. We don't really know.
And obviously it affects people, people do die from the flu, as you said.
Right. And it takes a little longer to mutate than the way COVID seems to mutate, that, it's 3 or 4 times a year. But we're going to have to, our new reality, I think, is going to be a couple of COVID boosters per year. I think, I'm being a futurist now, but I'll say my final thoughts.
Nothing wrong with that.
We're going to have to take a couple of boosters per year. I think activities such as plane flying, movie theaters, museum visits, and things of that nature are all going to be masked. And responsible people need to do that.
Agreed.
And that's the new way forward. And I think blogs like Dr. Topol's kind of start giving you
a roadmap,
roadmap as to what you need to do as an individual. This is not the government telling you what to do. This is you as an individual telling yourself what to do.
I'm going to wish everyone a happy new year. And Luke, I'll catch you on the flip side in 2022.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Urban Health Weekly today. I hope you'll join me and my friends next week so you can stay informed and inspired to take control of your health. See you next time.